All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this special session with Sebastian, who will be talking a little bit more about the lean startup methodology. And we're really excited about this because we think that, especially when you're starting a new business, this method can really help you get your startup off the ground quickly and focus on what's really important. So thank you so much, Sebastian, for taking the time. And
Pleasure.
yeah, I would like to hand over to you.
Okay, so hi everyone. Um, I would say maybe a few words about me and what we're going to do today. And since we are just like a small group of, I think, 4 people, maybe we can do like a little introduction round. And then let's see how interactive or theoretical we will keep the sessions. I'm prepared for both. So it depends on how you feel, if you want to like participate and apply one of these tools at least, or if you just want to lean back and get informed. So about myself, I've been working in early stage startup support for the past, I think, 7 years already now. And I started off as a startup coach for students, researchers, graduates from the academic environment. And at that time, I worked a lot with the lean startup methodology. And I think it's a very powerful framework, which is why I'm delighted to maybe pass it on to you today. And also, I like worked a lot in acquisition of funding with the teams, go-to-market strategy, pitch training. So to say, the essentials in the early stages of founding a company. And after that, I was leading an association of universities in Hamburg, where we did the same, but like more in programs. We had an impact incubator and the co-founder matching program and stuff like this, and where I overlooked the portfolio of programs. And now I'm supporting startups who want to innovate the public administration sector. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work to do in this field. Okay, so maybe I'll pass it on to you. Maybe you just say a few words where you are. So for me, it would be interesting in what stage of founding you are, if you just have general interest or already have an idea, or maybe you're in the product development or already in the market. And also if you have some um, proficiency with lean startup, if you worked with this tools before. Um, Anjana, can I pass it on
Sure.
to you?
Hello everyone. I'm Anjana. Sorry about my voice. A bit sick today, but I'm really looking forward to the session. I currently work with Lufthansa Group in the CCO's Executive Office in Strategy and Business Development. And unfortunately, I do not have any lean startup knowledge or experience, and I'm not even close to being a founder. But I was very curious about the framework when I received this invitation, and because I'm generally interested in learning new things and new methodologies, and I recently attended an Impact Week, and I was very impressed. That's why I'm here to gain some new knowledge, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe I become a founder someday using this framework.
Hopefully after today.
Yeah, thanks.
No.
And I would pass it on to Calvin.
Thank you, Anya. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelvin. I'm from currently in South Africa, Cape Town. I'm from R Labs, and okay, let me put it this like this. Okay, I have my two businesses, my two startups, and since I'm also part of R Labs, I'm actually heading up the enterprise and development department, which we also have R Labs Capital, which within R Labs Capital we invested in a couple of startups, and I'm also heading that up that portfolio. And I came in, so when I saw the opportunity, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Let me just kind of I actually want to learn more and to get myself into just kind of just be a sponge and just take as much as I can, because also in 2020 and my other three startups failed because of COVID,
Mm.
yeah, so that was not a nice thing, but I actually learned. So that's why I'm here. Also, yes, I was part of the Impact Group when they were here in Cape Town. I think forgot which year, but yeah. But thank you, and I'll post the the ball to Marta.
Hi. So I work for Lufthansa in Poland as a key account manager. I had a great pleasure to take part in Impact Week in South Africa with Caroline. And now this topic is just the interest of me, but I don't deal with, so it's like getting more knowledge. So
Yeah.
thank you.
So I think since we're getting more people here, I think we run a bit out of time if we do the entire introduction round, but I'm glad to see more faces popping up. So maybe if you feel like you could just write in the chat like in what stage you are and if you have any experience with Lean Startup. And meanwhile, I would just start the presentation. And so if you have any questions as we go along, just feel free to pose them. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So what I intend to do with you today, obviously, I start with an introduction about the methodology. I think some of you may already know a few aspects of it. The Lean Canvas is widely known, for example, but the Lean Startup framework has a few other tools which I find quite handy. And afterwards, we can decide if we want to dive a little bit deeper into the Lean Canvas and do a little practice session for that tool, or if you're more interested in more theory, then we could dive into the problem solution fit a bit deeper. And then at the end, we will round it up with a Q&A session and maybe see if there's interest for a follow-up workshop. So to start it off, about Lean Startup. So where's the need for this kind of framework? Today, in the digital age, we find that it's becoming increasingly cheaper and more easy to build, especially digital products. I think you all can relate. I mean, if you look at the App Store, there's so many apps and so much software popping up every day, which means there's a lot of choices for customers and also for investors. For customers over time, and maybe you can tell from your own experience, they become more picky and less tolerant for, let's say, suboptimal solutions. So for example, if you download an app and the app doesn't get you right away, you don't turn into a patient beta tester and provide feedback over a long period of time. What you're going to do, you just leave. And this kind of intolerance is common nowadays. So which means for us that if we launch a product, that we have to make sure that from the beginning, we really resonate with the customers we want to reach. And in contrast to that, to the very picky audience, us as founders, we love our products, right? But we got sparked with an idea, and then we said, okay, that's a really good idea. And we fall in love with that solution because we are so passionate about it. And sometimes that makes us blind for the market. So then we just have selective perception and we see confirmations everywhere for our idea, although the signals might be misinterpreted from our side. And maybe other people just want to be polite and say, yeah, that's a very interesting solutions, but they don't tell you that they would never pay money for it. So we are strongly biased, of course. And the other challenge we see is that, of course, when we start a new business, usually we have very scarce resources. And that's the argumentational ground for Lean Startup, because Lean Startup is a systematic process for iterating from a first idea to a business model that works, and that ideally before running out of resources. So we try to objectify it a little bit and make it less subjective and take the bias we have as much out of the system as possible. And there are a few mindsets which we have to embrace. So for first, one of the sub-headlines of Lean Startup is that the business model is the product. So we're not focusing so much on the product, but we always keep the entire business model in mind. We will talk about that in a minute. So we would always look at the customer segments, at their problems, at the channels, how to reach them, also at our traction metrics, and not only at the product and its features. And secondly, especially in the very early stage, we should ideally, I know it's not possible, but in an ideal world, we would just forget our solution for some time and just only focus on the problem, on the customer exploration. And in that aspect, Lean Startup is very similar to design thinking, with which Impact Week works a lot, I guess. Third, traction is the goal. So in each stage of starting up, even if we divide the early stages in more smaller stages, we're always looking for some traction. What traction is, most people of you, I guess, know, but we will also touch that a bit later in this workshop. And then it's a lot about prioritizing tasks. So right action, right time, it's easily said, as well as tackle your riskiest assumptions first. Because often what I see in startup support, that there's like a broad range of topics provided. So we can help you with HR, with legal, with tax. We can talk with you about marketing channels, about sales strategies. And all of these are very legit topics, but it's not relevant. In the very, very beginning, there's another thing you should focus on. And this is who's your customer and does he or she has a problem big enough for solving? And only then at later stages, you would look into sales and marketing and HR and found a company legally and these kind of things. So prioritizing is a huge aspect, a huge advantage this framework is promoting. So how does it look like? You all know the hockey stick curve. Usually we have, like when we talk about Lean Startup and generally about founding companies, we always encounter the same big milestones. So in the beginning, the very beginning, we should have a first draft of our holistic business model. And then the first big milestone is problem solution fit. So this is, in this phase, you would like go to the customers, prospective customers, interview them, concrete your unique value proposition, maybe design a demo and embed that into an offer and iterate that back to the customers. So until you really understand your customer's problem and you know they have a desire for your solution, even if it's only a promise right now, but like the desire for your theoretical solution, so to say. So because only then you should invest like all the money and resources to really build your product if you achieve this problem solution. But there's no building in this very first stage. And then if you hit this milestone, then you can like start with your MVP, you can iterate it, you can test your marketing and sales channels, you can play with your pricing, and try to provoke some traction in the market. And there's a second very well-known milestone, product market fit, which I'm sure you all have heard about, until you come to a point where you are able to sell your solution repeatedly. So then you have some kind of evidence and you have traction. And this is usually the point where it becomes interesting to investors, to give you money to make your already working business model grow. And so the overall logic here is, you first present a demo, then you try to sell this demo, and only then you start building. So this is the prioritizing I've been talking about before. And to help you with that, Lean Startup comes with a set of tools, and the most known one is the Lean Canvas, and this can be used to map your, say, intentionally assumed business model. So a business model is describes how you generate monetizable value for your customers. That's very easily put. Monetizable because you want to earn some money at some point. This is what sets you apart from a hobby or for an NGO that might work a donation based, because since we are working in the field of social entrepreneurship, that includes some revenue earning to realize your impact later on. And I will quickly walk you through the fields. We will address that later again. So we have, as you see, it's similar to the business model canvas from Osterwalder, you probably know, but the inventor, Ash Maria, has swapped a few fields which make it a bit more apt for early stage inventing. So you have the customer segment on the right side. You have your early adopters, like those who feel the biggest pain, who you can most easily convince about your new solution. On the left side, you have the existing alternatives. So how are they solving their job to be done today? And what problems do they encounter while doing that? You have your unique value proposition. What do you promise to them? How you want to help them? How you want to help them achieving their desired outcome. And only then there's a small field, which is intentionally be very small in this canvas, which is a solution. Like, do you build an app or a platform or have some kind of physical product? And the channels, how you reach your customers. Two fields for the cost structure and the revenue streams. The key metric, the traction metric, how do you measure success and maybe impact in your business model? And then finally, unfair advantage. So that's something that can't easily be copied or bought, that sets you apart for competition and maybe protects and defends your business model at a later stage. Later, if we opt for looking more into the business model canvas, then we can go through these fields in more detail. Unless you later say that's all known to me, then we move on to a more like how to achieve problem solution fit. Well, what you should take away from this chart is the mindset that the business model is just a draft and everything you write in there is nothing but assumption. So it's all hypotheses. And then you look, okay, which of these assumptions are the most riskiest one for me? Which can really like derail my startup if they shown to be wrong? And that is like the biggest assumptions are usually the one that who is my customer and what is their problem and is it big enough to justify to build a company up on it. And the second biggest is usually what's your unique value proposition, what do you promise them, what's your solution, and also what's your revenue stream, or to put it in numbers, like do you have a viable economic model behind your business model? Like, can you make it fly? Can you earn money with that? So it has a lot to do with pricing, for example. It depends on where you come from. Sometimes if you come from an industry you know very, very well, then maybe the customer segment and the problem is not the biggest assumption or not the riskiest assumption because you know your environment, you know your customers. Sometimes if you build deep tech solution, then maybe the solution, the technology becomes the highest risk. So that's very general speaking here, and it might be different for each of your cases. And then one thing to add, so I assume most of you work in multi-sided business model because impact business models usually or often involve at least two different target groups. So maybe you have a paying customer and a user, so a beneficiary of these impact services. But also if you build, for example, a platform or a marketplace, then you have, like two different sides you have to juggle in this business model. And then what you do is you just use different colors for it. So you have maybe post-its in green for the one group and post-its in blue for the other group. And you try to both illustrate it in the same canvas. The other tool, which I find very, very helpful, is this called the customer forces. And this is to reflect on the desirability of a new or maybe your solution. And what I want to do is that we say that there are maybe no new problems we have to solve nowadays, because we are all very saturated already. But we have different things we want to achieve in our all-day life or in our business life. We have certain jobs to be done. So desired outcomes, maybe you want to go from A to B, or be entertained at home, or solve a certain task at work. And we already do that in some or the other way. So we have existing alternatives. And then maybe some triggering event happens. That could be like a change in life circumstances. Maybe you become parents, or someone marries, or it could be you are promoted in a job, or maybe a new competitor enters the market, or maybe it's just someone refers a new solution to you. So some kind of disturbance, perturbation of your usual routines. And then you realize, okay, something is maybe suboptimal with the way I'm solving this job right now. Maybe there is some, I don't know, some friction, something I don't really like. So it doesn't solve my task as I wish it to do. So that's the push force. So something that pushes me away from my current way of doing things. And on the other side, uphill, we have the new solution. It might be your solution in the future, which attracts the customer. It has some kind of promise. It says, hey, look, like I know with your current alternatives, it's not working so well, but I have something for you. Like I can promise you a new way of solving your solution. And that being said, so it will have some kind of pull effect. So something that pulling you away from the old solution into the new solution. And this kind of switch you want to provoke in the customers, like they are having their routines, but you want to pull them out of their routines and pull them towards your solution. And of course, this switch is connected with some kind of friction and inertia. So friction, well, let's start with inertia. Inertia is something that keeps the customers with their current solution. Maybe they're locked into long-term contracts, or they're just used to it because we are all creatures of habit, right? So we've been using an app just because we know how it works, and that makes us very comfortable with that. So there's some kind of inertia that keeps the customers to their old solution. And on the other side, switching to a new solution involves some kind of friction, because maybe we have to, in a minute, Kelvin, maybe we have to sign a new contract, or we have to get used to the other solution and see how that works. So, I think you can relate from your own experience. Whenever you have a new product you use, you have some instant hurdles you have to overcome. Kelvin, please.
Sorry to disturb. So I just wanted to chime in based on my personal experience, is that also because you've mentioned some a couple of profound points, which is actually I love. Also is that I too also apply design thinking, just trying to understand exactly what the customer needs and wants. It's that there was a situation, I kind of categorize them: situation, motivation, expectations, then emotions and perceptions, which means what the buyer what the buyer needs or wants to do, again what the buyer wants to accomplish. The third one was what the buyer what final results the buyer seeks. So it's something that all of these questions, so I to actually dive deep to understand exactly the customer's needs and wants, so that I actually understand even their emotions. And so I'm just wanted to echo on what you already said, but thank you so much.
Okay, that's nice. Yeah, I see you're very proficient also. Thanks for your comment. So the narrative of this tool is, and that's I found super helpful when looking for new problems which I want to solve in an entrepreneurial way, is that new problems come from old solutions. So maybe memorize this sentence and think about it once in a while. I find that very helpful when looking for new opportunities. And then there are two more tools which I will only cover very briefly here, because it's a bit later stage when going towards market entry. And the one thing, they call it the customer factory. And this is to understand more the number side of your business model. It's like, how do the numbers play together? There's some kind of acquisition where you turn some random people into prospects, and there's some kind of activation when you turn these prospects into paying customers. Of course, that when they pay, there's some revenue involved. We have some kind of retention. If you make happy buyers come to you again, you have some kind of referrals, hopefully word of mouth, that happy buyers or happy customers refer your solution to other customers. And of course, you will always have some churn, some attrition, some buyers who leave for whatever reason. And you can model that into a mathematical model. It's nothing very sophisticated, but it helps you to understand the dynamics of your business model, especially when you later talk in finance, when you talk in traction metrics. Like, it's good to have these numbers at hand so you can play with them and also see what's the leverage of referral on your business model. Like, do I have to, in order to achieve a certain traction or revenue, and what happens if I increase the price? What happens if I invest my scarce resources in customer happiness? Like, maybe retention plays better for me or works better for me than referrals. So you can develop a feeling of how the numbers play together. And then last tool I want to show to you is the traction roadmap. So this can be used especially when you plan your market entry, so your go-to-market strategy. And so the Lean Startup methodology says that the traction roadmap might even be more apt than the product roadmap, because the product roadmap always focuses on product, on developing features, and you can easily be distracted from the market. And as an alternative, you could model the traction roadmap and then differentiate it in now and next and later. So what do you do now? Like, how many at the end of problem solution fit? Like, how many paying customers you want to win? Loreen, can you mute your microphone? Perfect, thank you. And then in the next stage, maybe you look for a different customer segment. Maybe you need a different value proposition because you move from early adopters to early majority. And then even at a later stage, if you move towards product market fit, you have other dynamics at play. So you're more focusing on scaling your sales channels and your marketing activities. And I know this hockey stick curve, as it's always promoted, is a bit intimidating because you know this term of 10x, and everyone says, "Oh, you have to grow with 10x," and it sounds very intimidating because it goes super steep from one point. But try to think of it as from another perspective, because 10x means it's steep at the end, but it's very flat in the beginning. And that's also an advantage you can harness, because if it's very flat in the beginning, you really can take your time to do your basic homework when you start. Like, this is the homework we just talked about, like understand your customers, develop a super compelling value proposition, understand what kind of solution the customer desires. So you don't need to rush to sales from the beginning and then go out and sell your stuff and go to trade fairs and everything. You can leave that for later, because in the beginning, you're okay with just having a very flat traction curve. And I found that kind of relieving to think of it this way, because it takes some pressures from your shoulder when starting a business. And so we talked a lot about traction, just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So traction means you have some kind of evidence that your customers really care about your product. And that, for example, in the very early stage can be that they are signed up for paid pilot project, or they place some pre-orders. And at a later stage, that might be the number of active customers you have and the number of purchases they do per customer. So that can differ between the different stages of funding. And you can also formulate it as traction is the rate at which your business model generates monetizable customer value. And this is something, especially if you don't want to bootstrap and if you want to, have venture capital at some point, At latest at that point, investors going to ask you about your traction. So it's good to embrace this thinking right from the beginning. Okay. Yeah, it's what we just said. So traction is at the core of this whole framework, and this is because traction leads ultimately to revenue. It leads to investors' capital, and if you have an impact model, traction also correlates to the impact you can distribute. Because if you have a business side of your and a beneficiary side at your business model, like you have to earn money to then do good with this money. So you need the traction, you need the revenue to then use this and leverage this to do something good you do for your idealism. And then just one thought about lean startup and design thinking. They're not competitive methodologies, but I rather see them as complementary, because I think design thinking is like a perfect framework for the very early stage, for problem discovery, for ideation. You have this double diamond. So for customer exploration and to find your playing field, so to say. And if you did that, you can then like shift gradually to lean startup, because lean startup has a more business focus. And then what you have discovered during your design thinking stage, you can then implement into the lean startup and then like build a holistic business model out of it. And the framework helps you to move towards market entry. So I think it's very like can be subsequent, both frameworks. Okay, I do a little pause here because we rushed through a lot of theory and overview, although it was very superficial until here. Do you have questions or comments?
I think I have one question, but it's back to the lean canvas.
Yeah.
Yeah, here when we talk about early adopters, we're not talking about the customer personas, right? This is, or are we still talking about personas? Because this was a bit confusing for me.
Okay. Actually, the lean startup methodology advises to not use personas at all.
Okay.
Because personas have the disadvantage that it has a lot of, let's say, attributed labels you give to them, which is just assumptions or intuitive labels. So you make up a persona. Personas make your customer more tangible, but you assign a lot of things you think they would fulfill. So in these business models, it's better to look for the minimum differentiating criteria. It can be, for example, we have the example of Uber maybe later. And early adopters could be taxi users in big cities. So make it very placative and narrow it down to the one differentiating criteria and not like build a whole persona around it.
Okay.
Because it has potential to distract you.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. So I would now leave the choice to you. We can either dig a bit deeper into the lean canvas and like walk through these fields in more detail and look at an example. And maybe if we have some time, although it's already 10:37, or you can do that at home to fill out your own lean canvas. Or we can have a more detailed look into how to achieve problem solution fit. And that is about like customer interviews a lot. But we could also leave that for another meeting. So maybe just raise your virtual hands if you want to go for the lean canvas.
Okay, we have 2 people.
1 or 2. That looks like the minority.
Yeah. our side, a very vocal minority.
Yeah,
Um,
but also there's a lot of supporting material in the
mhm.
internet for the lean canvas, and maybe it's already known. So if you look it up, you find a lot of help how to fill it out and work with it.
Do you happen to have one of the templates? Because we could also upload it as supporting material on the platform.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
perfect.
post that.
You can also send it later.
Okay, okay, and then I'll do it later. All right. Okay, then we talk a little bit more about problem solution fit. Okay, so we said that we are here maybe at this early stage. So we have our first business model lined out. And then the first thing we said is problem solution fit. So we want to understand, have our customer understood, and know what kind of solution they would accept and desire. Like this is what we want to achieve in this problem solution fit stage. And just as the ballpark figure, you can estimate roughly 3 months to get to this point. Just if you ask yourself, how much time should I plan in for this? If you work full time and not part time, and for most cases, 90 days is a good orientation. And what you do in this stage, you do customer interviews, maybe semi-structured interviews. You design a demo. You embed this demo in an offer that comes also with a value proposition and a price tag. And then you try to sell it a few times. So you want to demonstrate at this point that you're able to sell just a few times, that there is some kind of, again, think in traction, there is some kind of evidence that customers really care about the solution you made up at this point, and you really, you know how to reach them and to resonate with their problem world. What you don't do in this very early stage is you don't build your product, you don't do marketing, you don't pitch to investors yet, and you don't have to hire people or legally, found a company or anything attached to that. You can leave that for later. And during this early stage, like try to focus on your early adopters. So the early adopters are those who are actively seeking remedy for their problems. So maybe you have a broader customer segments like business people and local residents and stuff, and then look for the early adopters, which you can convince the easiest. And ideally, that's like a tip from practice, like choose your early adopter segment so big that it carries you all the way through at least problem solution fit, or even better until problem market fit, because then you don't have this gap between the early adopters and then having to switch to the early majority, which is much harder to convince. So whatever you do in the beginning, try to really have this like a razor focus on your early adopters and interview them. And the way you do it, like with these customer interviews, we are first looking into these two parts of the business model. So the customer segment, the early adopters, the existing alternative, and the problem you want to solve. And this is where the second tool again comes into play. So it can help you to structure your interview. So this is actually what you're trying to find out. You have your early adopter, and he has he or she some triggering event, wants to switch to another solution, maybe has switched in the past to their current solution they're using right now. And like everything attached to this picture, you're trying to find out in your customer interviews. And you see that your solution does not play a role yet. It's just about like trying to figure out these forces, like what's the friction with their current solution, what makes them push away, what attracts them, what makes them stay with the current solution, like all these aspects. And this is like super important, because this I put 3 exclamation marks right here, because what I saw a lot in my experience is that people or founders skip that step a bit light-minded, because they talk to customers, they have an idea, they talk to customers, customers say, yeah, super interesting, come to us again later. And they haven't really understood it in depth, but they have some like statements of interest, and then they move on. They start building their product, then they're hiring people, they maybe eventually get funding. So they're really accelerating. And at some point, like maybe 1 or 2 years down the road, when they try to sell their product, they're realizing it doesn't really work. It doesn't resonate as I expected. So why don't people not buy it? Because they said they would be interested in the beginning. And this is where they might realize, okay, maybe my problem wasn't big enough for a business model at all. So this is why I advocate, like, please take your time at the very early stage and do this exercise very thoroughly, because it will help you throughout your entire founding process, and it maybe keeps you from going belly up in 2 years. Or maybe it prevents you from a big pivot you have to do because you realize, oh, maybe my customer segment wasn't so promising at all. So when conducting these customer interviews, having this picture in mind, you try to uncover their job to be done, what they're doing, what's their desired outcome, how do they do it today? Is there some triggering event they're experience in their life? How happy are they with their existing solutions? You can discuss these solutions and see if there is some friction. Like, that's the thing you want to find, of course, like friction with the current solutions. And the basic rule is, obviously, do not talk about your solution. From experience, sometimes it's hard to get customers convinced to run a conversation with you if you don't give them anything at all. Then you can maybe say, okay, I'll give you some idea of what I'm trying to do, but I give it at the end of the conversation, like to, satisfy their curiosity. But the first 20 minutes or half an hour, you will only talk about their world. And then talk about what they did in the past, because that's the only real thing you can measure. Like, ideally, you have a customer or prospect that has undergone this change or this purchase situation in the very past. So talk with them, like when they opted for, let's say, this app, like what other apps they were looking into, and why did they decide for this app? Like, trying to, explore their purchase decision in the past. And don't ask them, like, what would you do in the future? Would you prefer this or would you prefer that? And what do you think, like, could you imagine to use this kind of application in the future? Because it's very hypothetical and people maybe can't trust their own imagination or their own notions at that point. And then also a tip from practice, go from broad to specific. Like, if you do these customer interviews, don't have it super structured, because it's, at the end of the day, it's an exploration. So you want to give the customer a little bit of leeway to elaborate their own thoughts. Like, give them a topic and then see where they lead you, because otherwise, if you have a certain problem in mind you want to have confirmed in this interview, then maybe you're focusing too much on this small problem and there's a much bigger problem next to it, and the customer would rather like to talk about, which you ignore then. So try to give them a little bit of room for their thoughts in the beginning. Let them talk, let them, take you through their world, and then go from broad more to specific. That will help you a lot. And also for orientation, you don't need to conduct 100 interviews, like 10 to 20 is okay. But that only if the answers you're getting are consistent. Because sometimes if you run 10 interviews and they keep telling you the exact same thing, like, we're all struggling with this one tool we have to use and it's super shit and we need a new solution. If this feedback comes consistently, then you're onto something. On the other side, if you run 50 interviews and you keep getting totally different signals from them, and you can't really see a pattern, that's a red flag where you should not continue. So you need like 10 to 20 very consistent customer feedbacks. And then having this problem side validated, we go into validating the theoretical solution, so the value proposition, the revenue streams. And the way you do that is you bundle a nice little offer for them. And this consists of your value proposition, so your promise, also a little product demo, a solution demo, and put a price tag to it. And maybe 2 or 3 points to this picture. So a demo is something that showcases the least about your product to cause a sale. So it can be something very simple. It doesn't have to be a click dummy or anything very sophisticated. The only purpose it has is to illustrate your unique value proposition. So maybe it's just the very key customer journey you want to illustrate. There's no functionality attached to it. It should not be a working prototype or anything with technology in the backbone. Also, it can just be verbal. You can only describe the solution you're trying to build and observe the resonance you're getting. Or it can be a slide or a one-pager, or Dropbox, for example, just used a video back in the days, like a 3 or 5 minute video where they explain what they're trying to build. Or if you have a tangible product, it can be a 3D print. So you see something that's very simple and very like downsized and only tries to test your UVP or illustrate your UVP. And another thing founders often do, and which is not very recommendable, is they defer to test pricing. But pricing, or the willingness to pay for your solution, is a super critical assumption in your business model as well. But since founders are concerned or worried that they get bad signals if they ask for money, that they get detached, then people try to, I will do that later. For now, I just offer a free version. I give a free probationary period to my pilot customers. I don't ask for money because it's something that feels very uncomfortable for us. And I can totally understand that. But at the same time, if you defer the pricing test too much into the future, then you maybe will have an awakening and realize, oh, damn it, they all like my solution, but actually they're not willing to pay for it. So make that your habit to ask for money right at the beginning. Doesn't have to be the final price. You will iterate to the final market price, value-based and competition-based and so on in the future, but try to figure out if people are willing to pay for that solution, because that's a very, very strong signal that your business model can survive the reality check. And then I said earlier that if you have this offer, you're trying to sell it. Obviously, you don't have a product yet. So what does sell mean? And again, think in terms of traction. Ideally, you would have paid pre-orders. You could also have maybe a paid pilot. If that's not possible, maybe a letter of intent. But the reasoning here is get as close to a real sale as possible. Because that's something, again, that is evidence for a working business model. And not a bit more than just a statement of interest. Like try to push it so much towards sales as possible. That helps a lot. Okay, then last slide for today. So how do you know that you have reached problem solution fit? There are 3 criteria for that. Like first, you could demonstrate demand through repeated sales. This is what we just talked about a minute ago. So customers have a very strong feeling, evidence-based feeling, that your customers are willing to pay for your product once it's built. Then you have presented a solution in form of a demo that you know you can build. At least it's very likely that you build. Of course, if you promise I'll fly you to the moon for 250 euros, people probably sign up for it and maybe even pay you up front. But like it's totally out of the picture. So the solution you're presenting should at least be in the range of feasibility. And also your somewhere at a price point that could make your business model fly. Like it doesn't has to be the final price, but people are willing to pay something that the numbers can work out with. And if you got to this point, then you have all these fields almost validated. And only then you should start like setting up your developers and building the product and developing features and so on and so on, and marketing and sales, whatever comes. And the good point, maybe the last thing I want to add at this point, the good thing is to get you to problem solution fit, you don't need any money. Like you can even do it beside your regular job. It just takes time and effort, but you don't need to buy anything. You don't have to legally found anything. You just need time from you and your team to get to this point. And that's a very digestible investment, I would say. Okay. I'll stop the screen sharing.
Thank you so much for the comprehensive overview. I think a few of the points are quite familiar to the people that have been going through design thinking workshops, particularly speaking to customers, getting some insights, but also building a demo or a quick prototype. Yeah, I think the next step of trying to sell them, of course, is quite interesting for anyone actually wanting to build the venture. Um, yeah, I wanted to give the word to the audience. Is there any open questions or any comments?
Yes, I think Jude.
Everyone, good morning. Thank you for that, Sebastian. The question that I have is, for these models, are there any certain industries that would have like certain limitations, or could it be adjusted for certain types of industries? Or could you say that this is like an overarching model that can be applied to most business models?
Yes, I would say it's very industry agnostic, so you can use it for all industries. It's especially apt, as I said, for the very early stage. So if you want to describe like big companies and understand their business model, then you can maybe refer to the original business model canvas. But whenever you start up and develop something new, like even in where I work, we use it. Although I'm working in a big corporate, using it for new innovations. Because it's very very customer centric. It has some limitations, maybe if it becomes very multi-sided. So then it can be a bit confusing to have very different colors and groups and this. I think for two target groups, users and customers, it's still okay. And even for impact models, you can add an impact metric. You can adjust it a little bit to your needs. But apart from that, it's overarching for all industries, I would say.
Thank you.
And maybe it especially works well, of course, for digital products. But I think that holds true for many of the frameworks today, like even for design thinking. Like if you go really deep tech, then usually you have your technology first, and then you're looking for a playing field and try to find a customer and a use case for that. But usually for digital products, you can follow the demo sell build circle much easier.
You may be able to see this also on websites, for example, of startups, that they often just have a very basic website and then the opportunity to sign up if they want more information, or you can kind of test how much interest there is out there. And I think you can find a lot of examples. Maybe you can also browse the startups on our Impact Week platform. A few of them are using that method as well. And I think you'll be able to notice it much more after this session, now that you're aware of this concept.
In like terms
Carl,
of problem solution fit and something alike, you will encounter a lot in the startup world. Yeah.
it definitely makes sense. Yeah, Carl is saying in the comments that he's thankful for the interesting and helpful session, and he's realizing how much work he has ahead. Um, yeah, it's thank you for the comment, Carl, and thank you for joining. Any other questions out there? Um,
Hi, Julian here.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to be able to connect and just be able to see off some of the familiar faces that I've met before. I've been part of 3 Impact Weeks in the past, which have been conducted in India.
Wow.
And recently, I've just joined a new university, and coincidentally, in this university, we're offering a course on customer experience, user experience design. So recently, because again, this is a newly established university, I was able to help them with design thinking. But then, normally, in the solution phase of design thinking, we would try to accompany business model canvas towards the end of the process to help guide the students as to idea to business kind of practice of sort. I'm wondering if we can what do you say, substitute or replace lean canvas instead of business model canvas. I've never tried this, and as far as design thinking is concerned, what is your view on this, Sebastian?
You can try it out. I mean, what I said, I think business model canvas is really good to describe working business models, to understand their resources, their key partners. But these are things that usually are more relevant for grown companies. So especially if you're working in these, like as you said, like user experience, design, why not? Yeah.
Yep. And something which is new to me, I mean, these are new learnings which I'm quite excited, especially the UVP. I mean, between MVP, UVP, and then a prototype. Um, a very, very, I wouldn't say small difference, but then between a UVP and a prototype, for example, can we use UVP instead of, let's say, when I'm talking about design thinking, can we try with a UVP instead of a prototype? I mean, it sounds close. I don't know.
So you mean MVP? UVP is just a promise. UVP is
Yes,
just a sentence. Do you
just
mean
a
that?
sentence. Yeah, I mean that.
Mhm.
Sometimes, yeah, it's fun to make, a prototype, but sometimes you have groups that kind of may just have a presentation, may just have a sentence, like you said. They may
Mhm.
just have an idea in their head that they could present, maybe.
Yeah, I think the UVPs alone, if you would not have run a whole interview or something just to figure out your UVP, it always comes like together with other things as a package. But that's something you would, for example, you often see that, as Caroline said, on websites of startups. You would put the MVP on the landing side. That's the hook you want to lay out to catch your customers' attention, right? That's the thing that one is like, wait, that's me. Like they're addressing me. Like I have this problem. That's this promise is resonating with me, and then they would come and draw their attention to you, and then they would find the demo or the solution. So the UVP is just meant for the first grab of attention of your customers, but it's just a
Okay.
sentence. Like it's not much, uh, not much around it.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Sebastian. This is my first time attending masterclass on Lead Canvas. So it's very interesting, new learning for me, but thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, as you see on this slide, like I'm happy to give a follow-up workshop if you're interested in certain aspects, like because today was very general and maybe a bit overwhelming because we touched upon, different tools and different models. So if you're interested in one of these things, like especially how to draft impact business models on the lean canvas, or a deep dive how to conduct customer interviews, or if you want to move a bit more later stage and see how problem market fit, especially like the MVP iteration and the go-to market works, or maybe traction modeling, if that's something you would like to understand, like how the numbers play together and create traction from the financial aspect of your business model, just leave a comment in the chat and I'll discuss with Caroline if we can realize that.
Yeah, I already see a few answers here, particularly the product market fit and the traction modeling. So yeah, seems like everyone's very interested in the topic. Thank you so much for today's session. And yeah, we'll upload the recording on our platform together with the Lean Model Canvas. So you can look it up anytime you want. If Anjana decides to start her business anytime soon, you can watch the recording. And yeah, stay tuned for more of these input sessions. I'm sure Sebastian and I will discuss the answers or the interest topics here in the chat. And then I hope to see you all soon.
Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.